Xirtus.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Join us on another exciting adventure of Xirtus.
Then in the United States, many attempts for flying machines took off. A sort of early 20th century aviation spring, where ever since the 1890s, different inventors were creating balloon ships, even skyrockets, all with the intention of marrying jet propulsion to balloons. It seemed the obvious answer, and that there was no end in sight. Balloons rose. With a balloon, a craft could rise. With a jet, the craft could move forward. There were literally hundreds of different patents and maybe thousands of attempts. And a lot of people nearly succeeded, and many people died. But not all of these were such haphazard garage ideas. In fact, the military were quite interested in balloons themselves. And if it weren't for the Zeppelins, which could lift heavy loads, including tanks, and could fly for days at a time, as opposed to the few hours planes could manage back in 1922, let alone before that. And in fact, before fast planes, there was a time in the 19th century where military airships really shined. However, with one giant balloon, there's always the potential for the destruction, for popping and losing the entire ability for the craft to fly. And this tends to be the historical narrative of why air balloons have not been so successful, no matter how many times they've been tried. Alluring as they might seem, and as practical as they might actually be, it just seems too perfect. Like they don't want you to know that these things can be usable. And I remember as a kid taking a silk shirt and putting it over the heater in the floor and letting the heat fill the shirt, and the shirt rising about 6 feet up off the ground, and then the air escaping the shirt and it falling to the ground again. So it seems like anyone with access to those things, even as a 6-year-old, would intuit the natural efficacy of air balloon flight. So there's this guy named Francois Leray Darland, and he was a Moorish-French aviator, and tragically, he's in the first crash. It seems like he was probably a pretty cool guy, and he had done a lot of important things. He was an important soldier, he was a great inventor, and he was an adventurer and the kind of guy who would try anything, apparently. And maybe that was his downfall, because other people knew that, and so they said, yeah, you get in the hot air balloon. And he crashed right over Versailles. It was super traumatic. He even hit people. It was a pretty bad day. But there was a number of other false starts with balloons, and even other balloons that weren't using just hot air, which added other complications. And the fact that these are going to be used mainly for military purpose made them seem too dangerous. So if anything, they would have been classified and kept in the secrets, used in the dark. And there was only so many people that could work towards making hot air balloons for the people. However, they still exist. People use them all the time, and they're pretty awesome. I've been in a few. I actually like them. I've never felt unsafe. Everyone acts like they think it would be such a dangerous thing, but it seems pretty safe. It's a lot nicer than 500 miles an hour and a metal bird that's falling. And you get to see everything in that wicker basket's pretty, strong. Like wicker's very strong. But onto some of these chemical balloons, because this is where things get kind of crazy, is they realized that using other substances besides oxygen, you could make lift. Helium balloons, of course, are very popular, but hydrogen balloons are even better, and somewhat better than that's ammonia. So using ammonia, you can actually connect a carbon to a hydrogen and nitrogen to triple hydrogen to make a 3-bond. And what this does around the ammonia is produce a chemical reaction of heat. This can be accomplished with piezoelectricity or sunlight, amongst other ways. So needless to say, there was a lot of effort being put in by chemists in the 1700s to producing ammonia gas balloons on a large scale that then could be attached to crafts for people. I mean, literally carriages and other sorts of balloons, so that if it fell, you would fall in a balloon. So this was becoming a lot safer, it would seem. Unfortunately, with the lack of the kinds of nanotechnology and synthetic materials that were available in the last 20 years, let alone 100, something that should have been considered a bit more was if there was ever a problem, and often there was, especially in the first days. And that's really all there were, because after the first days, where ammonia escaped the balloons, creating nitrogen so close to heat sources, eventually causing serious explosions and killing Darland in the process. And don't worry, the Montgolfier brothers died too. In fact, it seems like a lot of people died playing with hot air balloons. Admittedly, not something that sells them in their favor. However, again, this is back at the beginning of the 1700s, when very few people had any information about these except for what they found in their private libraries from ancient times. And it's funny because today we're using the exact same technology but with better materials in order to create water ammonia vapor mixture balloons that attach to drones or attach to chairs for week or month or sometimes year-long balloon trips, mostly not by people, but by machines. Google, in fact, has a project called Project Loon, a project to put laser-sighted internet, which would send unilateral laser in a far more directed and powerful than 5G technology above the clouds from one balloon to another, in order to produce a large laser-implemented fiber optic speed radio network. And also, because of all the sensors you can attach to a balloon that stays in the air for months at a time. A lot of Loon balloons have been in service for several years now, and because of the solar panels and Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, and other technology, these artificial intelligence-enabled drone balloons hardly need human interaction and just stay floating. And the military was really interested in making ironclad balloons which were safe because they were impenetrable. It seems like there was a number of really great advancements that happened in this, and while a lot of it's classified, you can look into aerospace crafts that have multi-balloon fixtures, sort of like lungs have alveoli. Within these sort of crafts made by Lockheed Martin, for instance, the Super Airship Hybrid, a sort of bulletproof balloon hovercraft, and it's one of many crafts being made by Lockheed Martin amongst other companies which implement the great idea of Zeppelin technology into the airship in order to have dirigibles with frames. The idea of a frame is becoming more and more abstract as technology becomes flexible, and graphene makes it possible for nanoscopic fabric material to be essentially bulletproof and, while naturally in a relaxed state, using electrostatic, bend and shape itself using a sort of origami to stay in a fully solid structure. Plus, these things are huge. The new dirigible airships can hold dozens of tanks and planes, thousands of people. But it's not just the military that have these crafts. In fact, it looks like the future is full of dirigibles, more likely for cruises and for large multi-hundred-million-dollar corporations and billion-dollar projects than for their personal family vehicle. And that seems a little planned and tragic, because at one point in the 20th century, it wouldn't have been too hard for the American average family to have afforded one of these. Maybe not one of these, but even a house would have been possible. And I know it seems crazy, but literally with electrostatic and balloons, you could create an entire new level of housing which would be able to rise above the clouds like the Jetsons. This is one of the older stories about the balloon people, that they created a way to get away from the Earth. And then they did. One of the most famous versions of this story from ancient China. The Chinese have a story about a princess and Chang'e. And the story is basically about this ancient sorcerer who was an inventor and a warrior and worked really hard on inventing a spaceship. And eventually he invented a spaceship and he kidnapped a princess and he went to the moon and never came back with her. It seems like some of the story is rooted in myth and that there's a lot of this that's rooted in truth. The ancient Chinese inventor of the Kongming balloon, Zhu Liang, supposedly from about 200 AD. Zhu Liang was referred to by the reverent title Kongming. He was a Chinese politician, a military strategist, a writer, an engineer, and inventor. He served as the chancellor in the region of the state of Shuhan during the Three Kingdoms period. He's recognized as the most accomplished strategist of his era, and has been compared to Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War. His reputation as an intelligent and learned scholar grew even while he was living in relative seclusion, earning him the nickname Wulong or Fulong, meaning crouching dragon. Zhu Liang is often depicted wearing a Taoist robe and holding a hand fan made of crane feathers. And I remember hearing a pretty crazy story in Chinatown from an old lady that once upon a time Kongming did an experiment with an egg, using the egg shell. To get it to rise into the air, he stuck some burning weeds through a hole in the shell. As the air got hotter, the shell got so light that the wind was able to lift it, and then later used the same idea to invent an early hot air balloon. He put an oil lamp inside of a large paper bag and lifted the bag so high it could float. And there's probably some myth to that truth, but there's also some truth there. And in fact, according to sinologist and historian of science Joseph Needham, the Chinese experimented with hot air balloons by the 3rd century BC, even though they're attributed only to Kongming 300 to 500 years later. There are stories that he is said to have used a message written on a sky lantern, and for this reason, they are still known in China as Kongming. And Wikipedia makes sure to include the citation that sky lanterns could be a possible explanation for some early UFO sightings through the years. However, the legends and the legacy of the Kongming, both the astronaut, inventor, as well as the aircrafts, and the story of the kidnapped moon princess of Changi, the space rabbit. Oh, did I mention Changi was a space rabbit? Yeah, that's something probably worth mentioning, is Changi's a rabbit. Take it seriously. In fact, the rabbit god of ancient Egypt, Wenet, or Enut, is a fierce and powerful, but most notoriously swift goddess, and often is associated with Easter, which is kind of interesting because originally Wenet was considered to be associated with serpents before bunny rabbits, or hares. I think hare is probably a fair term. But yeah, she went from being a serpent to a goddess with a woman's body and a hare's head after she became worshipped with Thoth at the capital of Hermopolis. Her male companion is Wenenu, and in a weird way, she kind of seems like the offspring of Changi and the princess of the moon. There really isn't enough literature about Wenu or Wenenu, but it does seem like a secret symbol particularly involved with the spreading and dissemination of information. And there's plenty of mythology about following the White Rabbit. In fact, the Ninja Turtles have a really great side character from a universe where Easter rabbits are ninja warriors. And of course that fits right in line with Changi, anthropomorphic humanoid rabbit characters, one's committing space travel thousands of years ago. It seems kind of unclear how sinister of a character Changi really is. Is he not actually fighting for the princess? And perhaps they are simply forbidden because they are not the same. It especially seems interesting to me that Wenet has been transmuted into the Easter Bunny, and granted, while they seem like they may be disconnected stories, the Tartarian Manchurian stories of Changi just seem a little weirder when you actually think about them than your average mythology. This seems more like something that actually happened and is being misinterpreted. And over the years, the stories have been transmuted a bit. But there are a lot of people that are very interested in the Year of the Rabbit and the Bunny God. In fact, there's Donnie Darko, there's Watership Down, there's so many things we could talk about. But aside from Egyptian mythology and cartoons like the Ninja Turtles, on the order of Laotian chaos shamanism or ancient Taoist sorcery, the Bunny God is a very important and mysterious character. I wouldn't exactly say the Bunny God's evil, but it does seem to live underground and mess around with kidnapping kids. Definitely a supernatural, super magical character. One that's not quite as cute as it first presents itself. In fact, it seems like cuteness is a sort of weapon, but underneath that fluffy, austere facade, what really lurks inside the soul of a bunny rabbit? A superior icon from Warner Brothers, Bugs Bunny, originally based on the hare Brer Rabbit from the Song of the South. It itself originally based on Akan African mythology. Bugs Bunny is, needless to say, a living symbol of a lifestyle, a philosophy, and a value system, about the complexity of the philosophical archetype of the rabbit, a mystical and ethereal symbolic symbol of the Kabbalah. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychoanalyst in the early 1900s who recognized that all humans connected on a metaphysical level, is known for many concepts, particularly of the collective consciousness, the anima and the animus, the male and female principles within us all, and the parallels of ancient energies, gods and goddesses, within current personality types. And he made extensive use of primeval symbolism in the understanding of humanity. One of the most important archetypes is that of the psychopomp. A psychopomp is a god or goddess energy form that acts as a liaison and guide between three worlds, the physical earthly level that we dwell upon, and the underworld and the heavens. In classical mythology, the Roman god Mercury was a psychopomp, for instance. He guided the ancient heroes through the underworld, and he also brought messages from above to the mere mortals upon the earth. The hare is a symbolic representation of that same energy. A rabbit is well at home here on the earthly plane, but a rabbit is also adept, comfortable in the netherworld of the underground tunnels and dark passages. A rabbit's acute perception makes them sensitive to the vibrations and energies that we cannot often comprehend, but in the underworld, those sensitivities are even more pronounced as sight is reduced to nil. Jungian psychology and the dream world both make prolific use of language puns. Symbolically, rabbit in the underworld is therefore representative of using one's intuition, knowing how to get around in the dark, and being comfortable traveling in unmarked territory. By default, it can also denote having or developing trust in inner light. Rabbit does not need an outside source to illuminate its way. Rabbit connects to the collective consciousness, maintaining rabbit's pathway. The hare is also an earth symbol by virtue of the fact that a rabbit is close to the ground and lives particularly in the ground itself. A rabbit could convey symbolically a need to center oneself, that earthly quality suggesting a zen-like ability to maintain focus even whilst all about is in chaos. Also, an animal that can become camouflaged in the earth in some way. The hare is also a symbol of the archetypical trickster. In world mythologies, Brer Rabbit is the trickster, and the rabbit Manabozho in Native American myths is also the trickster. The idea of the rabbit that can stay one step ahead of its enemies, literally from without or figuratively from within, knowing that the real rabbits zigzag in complex patterns to escape predators. The symbol evokes one of intelligence and one that is quicker than those in pursuit. And for the Native Americans, the rabbit is also a shapeshifter because they're being able to hide in the grass. To both the Native Apache and to the African Akan, another interesting aspect of the rabbit is its sense of sacrifice. Because rabbits are prey animals, symbolically rabbit is a prey animal. Dreams and imaginary uses of the meanings are interchangeable. In the sense that the rabbit dies so that the fox can eat, the rabbit sacrifices its life for the predator. In a sense, this could be interpreted as service to others. It is as if they are bringing their paws together in order to prey, to be prey animals. But wild hares tend to be a lot less cuddly, and it seems that there is room for a scarier rabbit. But maybe it doesn't need to be. In fact, maybe that's the point. It's the rabbit's innocence that contains any sort of immaculate quality, something that the ancients revered the rabbit for. Even the ancient Egyptians revered the rabbit. South Park recently revealed that St. Peter is actually St. Peter the rabbit. Of course, the Chinese named their lunar landing craft Chang'e 3 after Chang'e, the rabbit warrior. And who's to say what really went on, but there are some pretty interesting pictures. And one of the funny stories I heard from our friends in China was in the recordings, the government asked them to keep an eye out for the princess or the rabbit, to which their crew sounded like they took it pretty serious. And while no information was disclosed about the discovery of Chang'e the rabbit, or his stolen princess, or whatever happened to his spaceship, or whether or not he colonized the moon, creating some sort of a freakish hybrid, half bunny, half Manchurian space race, but I'm sure they're still looking for it, you know, wherever they're supposed to be looking.
Where is this airing right now? Is this...
Recent
This
Talk
program is
Terry
coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Talk Terry
Xirtus.